Did you know that over 20% of Native Americans have a diagnosable mental illness, but only about 10% actually seek treatment? And the story I'm about to share with you all today, my personal story, is a great example of why a statistic like that exists in our country. A quick trigger warning, because this story is very traumatic. I haven't shared it in this sort of platform yet because it's still traumatic for me. I'm still healing from it. But I am going to be talking about seizures. I'm going to be talking about medical violence and also suffocation. In February of 2020, I experienced a seizure for the first time in my life. It was stress-induced. My mother has seizures. She has a history of seizures, but I had never experienced one before until this point. And I kind of pushed my body and my mind and just my whole being to a limit, and had hit a point and just kind of fell out and ended up having a seizure. 911 had to be called. I was taken by ambulance to the University of Chicago Medical Center on the south side of Chicago. And when I arrived at the hospital, every step of the way, the people providing me healthcare, even the ambulance drivers, sort of assumed the worst of me because of where I was and how I looked. So that they had assumed that I was smoking PCP actually, and that it was a drug-induced seizure, despite my loved ones telling them otherwise, telling them no. They didn't believe us until the drug test came back clean. And even if I did come in on drugs, no one should get treated the way that they treated me after that. So I was in the ICU unit and I became conscious while I was intubated, which was not supposed to happen. So this memory exists in my mind like a bad nightmare, because I passed out before I had the seizure. I was unconscious for at least a day and a half. Even though I was awake, I don't really even remember what I was saying or doing. And so I had the seizure. I was taken to the hospital. When I came to in the ICU, I felt the tube down my throat, and I instantly started panicking because I have a lot of suffocation PTSD. I almost drowned a couple years ago. And so I immediately started panicking. I felt like I was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. And I started reaching for the tube, and I remember just like freaking out. And I remember everyone just being like, Frank, and then a bunch of people, and then I was out. So what happened was, when I became conscious and that happened, the doctors marked me with my chart with combative disorder. And they had several men come in and hold me down in the bed. They strapped me in the bed with locked restraints, and they pumped me full of sedatives, including a spinal tap. They did the spinal tap to try to rule out, to see if meningitis had caused the seizure. And so I was on several sedatives and was strapped into a bed with locked restraints for at least a day, maybe a day and a half. And when I became conscious, I was in the ICU unit. I had an EKG unit on my head, and my mother and one of my good sisters from back home on my reservation had driven out to be with me at that point. And I didn't even know where I was. I had to be told what happened to me. I had to be told like why my mom was there. The sedatives and the seizure just really messed with my memory too, and I was really looped up on sedatives when I became conscious. My relatives had also told me another thing that had happened during all of that. So I have scars on my body from a Lakota spiritual ceremony we do. We've been doing it for thousands of years, where we offer some of our flesh for prayer. So because of those scars, when I came in, the hospital saw them and they had assumed and marked them as self-mutilation, despite my relatives telling them otherwise. Again, every step of the way, they were being told by my loved ones otherwise, but they would not listen. They didn't even do a Google search. They just would not pay attention to us and assumed the worst every step of the way. So they had assumed it was self-mutilation. And when I became conscious, I was moved from the ICU to the regular floor. And immediately when I was brought into the room, the staff kicked out my family, my whole family. And then a psychiatrist and his assistant came in the room. And he sat down and he proceeded to start questioning me about my mental health, the state of my mental health, about suicidal ideation, about why I was panicking when I came in, about the scars on my body. And I told him the same thing my family told him. I was panicking because I have suffocation PTSD, because I almost drowned a year prior to that. And when I became conscious while I was intubated, I felt like I was drowning. I told them that the scars on my body were from a Lakota ceremony we do where we pray. I realized, they were trying to paint a picture of me coming in as like this madman, this person that was just flying off the handle in the bed, needed to be sedated, needed to be strapped in. I was self-mutilating. They were trying to send me to the psych ward, and I dodged all the questions so that wouldn't happen. And luckily, the psychiatrist and his assistant left. My family was allowed to come back in. I was allowed to stay in the room. But, then after that, the doctor came in. And the doctor started telling me that I needed to actually stay in the hospital for longer than I wanted or they expected, because they had actually done more damage to my body because of the way they treated me when I came in. So the doctor told me that when they shoot that many sedatives and cause that much muscle trauma all at one time in a young person's body, it can cause a spike in an enzyme in our blood called the CK enzyme. And, normal levels are below 400, I guess. And whenever I became conscious, my CK levels were over 40,000, and it was damaging my liver and kidneys. And so the hospital needed to keep me, and they kept me for a week and flushed me on IVs. It took a whole week to undo the damage that they had done to my body because of the mistreatment and the violence, the medical violence they put me through because of their racism. So, it was one of the worst weeks of my life. I was bruised from head to toe when I woke up and became conscious, and I felt like and looked like I got ran over by a truck. Like I had bruises from the locked restraints and them holding me down and me struggling because I felt like I was dying and suffocating, but they were holding me down and pumping me full of sedatives. And so, I just could barely even move. My body was so bruised and beat up. I felt like and looked like I had gotten run over by a truck. And so for that whole week, I couldn't go outside. I could barely walk. It was a tough time for me. There was even a night where I ordered food and they just didn't even deliver my food. And they were just really putting me through it. And I tweeted about the experience and just did an Instagram post with a photo of me in the hospital bed and just kind of shared what was going on with me. And the funny thing is, it started getting shared a lot, and I didn't even ask for this, but people started actually calling into the hospital and complaining and asking to speak to people about the way I was being treated. And they sent the entire head of patient relations to come see me, this woman, and she was being really nice to me. They were trying to make it up. They gave me parking vouchers, they gave me food vouchers, I think because they were getting put on blast. And so they were trying to really make it up, but by that point the damage had been done. And I shared with that the woman who was in charge of patient relations how displeased I was, how if this is how they treat their Native American patients, like that's really messed up. And the doctor who was treating me had even tried to tell me, and she wasn't much older than me, maybe even my age. She tried to tell me that I was the first Native American patient this city had ever serviced, and in a city that is a relocation center for Native people. So there are families here that have been here for decades. So I know that was a lie. So every step of the way they assumed the worst, and when they realized they were wrong, they tried to lie and do everything they could to cover up their steps and undo the damage they had done. But by then, like I said, the damage had been done. Again, I wanted to share that story in partnership with Providence St. Joseph Health Hospital to just inform people what can happen when you don't understand the cultures, the different cultures of the patients who are coming to your healthcare facility. Y'all signed an oath to give people the best healthcare you can give. And from hearing from my story, I don't think I was given the best healthcare I could have been given in that situation. And they actually did more damage to my body. I'm still healing. I still have a lot of PTSD, depression, insomnia. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and feel like I was suffocating and being held down still. it still has impacted my life greatly. And it's almost a year later and I'm still healing from it. It's still a weekly day-to-day struggle because of what that hospital did to me. And I'm just grateful I survived. So after that experience, after that week in the hospital, when I got out, I got home and I immediately wrote the song you heard in the beginning of this video, To Call My Spirit Back. Because after all that trauma, I felt like my spirit had left my body. And the funny thing about that song was, never in my life had I ever had an entire song already in my head, fully formed, ready to go. I usually have to work on songs, you know, you change pieces, you add, you take pieces out. But this song was already there, just waiting for me to call my spirit back. And I wanted to share that song with you all too, you know, just for anybody who's experienced trauma and had your spirit leave you through trauma, because that is something that my people believe can happen, and we're taught to call your spirit back in a lot of different ways. And music is one of the ways I call my spirit back. Again, thank you to Providence St. Joseph Health for collaborating with me to bring this song and this story in this learning moment to you all. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. Peace.